They're taking away our right to breathe clean air, to drink clean water, to live in a place that's safe.
What we're looking for is the best technical information we can get about that site.
No, we don't trust the state to handle this.
It's all proven technology. This kind of equipment is a series of components, all of which have a proven track record, a proven record of success.
This worried me so bad I can't hardly sleep. Now that's Lord knows truth. That's how it worries me.
Welcome to Assignment Sunday. I'm Walter Rasulullah. Will Granville County be home to a hazardous waste incinerator? Franklin County Superior Court Judge Robert Hobgood has issued an injunction against the state and its consideration of Granville County as a possible hazardous waste incinerator site. It is just one of the tactics residents are using to keep the facility out of Granville County. They're taking their fight to the courts and to the streets. A week ago, hundreds took to the streets in protest. It was not the first demonstration against the plan, and not the last. The state's Hazardous Waste Management Commission is considering two sites. One site is on the Rowan-Iredell County line near Statesville. The other is in Granville County, not far from the town of Oxford. This incinerator in Rock Hill, South Carolina, is similar to the type that could be built here in North Carolina. It's operated by Thermochem, the same company that will operate the facility in our state. This is an emotionally charged issue. People are concerned about their property values, their health, and the future of their children. The cry is not here, not there, not anywhere.
Cheers of go home, ominous signs of the future in this area, and an onslaught of theatrics. All part of this rally against Thermochem and the state and their ideas of putting a chemical incinerator here in Granville County.
The idea behind this rally, of course, is to make as much noise as possible. But most folks wonder how much difference that noise will make when it comes to making a decision on the incinerator site.
Well, there is no real problem in their coming out and giving their emotional viewpoints. But what we need is some scientific analysis.
But on this night, emotion is what dominated. The crowd booed both Thermochem officials and the board that will decide where to put the incinerator when they walked on stage. And one by one, people who will have to live with the incinerator, if it's put here, spoke out against it.
You really think you're looking out for the best interests of the people of the state of North Carolina and Granville County? I want to put this site in this state.
When Thermochem officials were able to respond, their answers were booed. Sometimes it was even worse.
But we don't burn everything. I mean, we don't accept everything.
The crowd of more than 2,000 organizers say is the best show of support by this community to date. Now, many here say they hope that will be enough to keep the incinerator out of their county. Dwayne Pullman, WRAL TV5 News, Granville County.
The sentiment is, not in my backyard. When Assignment Sunday continues, we'll talk with the Granville County residents fighting the incinerator, the chairman of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission, and Thermochem, the company that will operate the incinerator. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Assignment Sunday. Will Granville County be home to a hazardous waste incinerator? Joining us this morning are John Pike, an attorney from Granville County, Chris Combs, a Granville County resident, and Billy Elmore, a member of North Carolina Warren Waste Awareness Network. And also with us, Darrell Hennett, who is Executive Director of the Hazardous Waste Management Commission, and Rob Kirk, who works with the company Thermochem. And thank you all for joining us. I know this discussion has been on your minds for several weeks, and we need to and want to talk a little bit more about it this morning. Ms. Hennett, first of all, the injunction is now in place, so what's your next step?
Well, the Hazardous Waste Management Commission and the Attorney General's office is appealing the decision that was rendered by the judge yesterday.
And how long do you think this will take?
We have no idea.
So that's your next step. Now, John Pike, you've been one of the persons that's been instrumental in getting the public very much aware of this problem in Granville County. Do you think your protest in the last few weeks has influenced the judges, or did influence the judge's decision?
No, I don't think the judge would be influenced by any input. He has just looked at the merits of the case and has found the legislation and the Hazardous Waste Management Commission's position untenable, and he's ruled appropriately.
How successful do you think your proposal of the land deal that you have proposed has been? How successful has that been, and how much did that, or is that playing?
Well, it's certainly been appealing. We think it'll be very effective. One of the appeals of the site to either the Hazardous Waste Commission or Thermal Chem was that it had so few owners. They thought there were only 9. Now there are approximately 9,000. So we think it's going to make them think twice about trying to deal with that many people, and that's a sincere hope.
What's the anticipation at this point of your movement sort of taking off nationwide, because we know that this is an issue that faces a lot of states nationwide?
I don't know. I didn't intend it as a gimmick. I intended it as a statement that the people of Granville County really do care vehemently, emotionally. If other people choose to use that technique as a viable means of opposition, then I would certainly encourage it. I do know from my experience that it has been extremely difficult. My office has been consumed by the land sale and the other oppositions with GROW, and as a site designation review committee chairman for the last month and a half. So it's been extremely disrupting, but it's certainly a worthwhile method of opposition.
Do you think the land deals will slow the things down as you're operating now, or trying to get things moving now?
Yeah, I think it will. I'd have to defer to Mr. Hennant. I've not been involved in condemnation of a site of this magnitude, or any magnitude for that matter, but I think it's going to give them a little pause to wonder whether this site is appropriate.
What do you think, Mr. Hennant?
Well, I think the Commission has said all along that the action that Mr. Pike and his associates has taken on the portion of the site that we're reviewing may be in fact premature, because the Commission doesn't even know whether the Granville County site is acceptable yet or not. Part of the process that the Commission has to go through is to review and to test on the site to make sure all those determinations that have to be made are met by that particular site. If it turns out that the site is unacceptable, then we have to go someplace else to find another alternative site. We envision that Mr. Pike's theory, based on what he said here and what we've also heard at other occasions, will most affect the site at the time of condemnation, which is a year away, even if we get to that point in Granville County.
Who makes that decision on whether it's a viable site or not? How much are you involved, your company involved?
Well, Thermochem, as a contractor to the state, would work in conjunction with Commission and the state of North Carolina in doing further analysis that would involve engineering work, drilling to make sure the soil characteristics are acceptable, then analyzing that data, finding out issues such as water table, where the water table is at. Only at that point can we really determine whether the site is truly acceptable or not.
Mm-hmm. How was this site chosen?
It was chosen as at the end of a very long and very complex process, one that is mandated by the General Assembly, one that was started back for this particular process back in September, in which criteria were adopted by the Commission, proposed, I should say, allowed to be commented on by the public through the Administrative Procedures Act. And then as a result of those comments and suggestions, the Commission finally adopted rules, turned them over to a company who was involved in doing the mapping and the geography work that was necessary. They then selected the areas that were excluded based on those rules. We then considered the areas that were left within the available areas, and that process went forth until we came up with 18 high priority potentially available parcels, and from that 2 of the 18 were selected.
Why not in Granville County, Billy? Why not have this site there?
Well, okay, I'm concerned with the entire state, and for that reason, I say not anywhere in North Carolina. We do not want incineration in North Carolina or landfills, because we feel that both are the least desirable and potentially most hazardous to the population. The health risks are too great. And for this reason, we are assisting the citizens of North Carolina in opposing these, particularly these two ways of treating hazardous waste. And NC Warren is 36 different environmental organizations and concerned citizens organizations that are committed to helping each other in North Carolina. It is a network, and we are very much opposed because of the things that are going to come out of that smokestack. Now, the state says water, CO2, and particulates. Well, those fine particulates carry vaporized toxic metals that are going to affect the health of particularly the children of North Carolina. And there have been studies done that show that the heavy metals coming out of those stacks can lower the children's IQs, it can make them shorter in stature, can cause hearing impairments, neurological damage, it can affect the kidneys, the liver. There are all kinds of health effects of these toxic chemicals.
What's going to happen to Granville County if this is placed there?
Well, I suppose that it will not lessen our desire to oppose this facility by any means. I think that if you're talking long term, if the facility is actually built, we think that it will make Granville County a ghost town. People will not want to purchase property there. Desirable industries will not want to locate there. And I believe firmly that the people that are there, when their children are raised, they will move off and the county will slowly die.
What about these health hazards that Billy's raised?
Okay, may I address Chris's question first or comments first? The UNC Department of Public Health, UNC Chapel Hill Department of Public Health just reviewed some data regarding the sites that were evaluated east of the Mississippi. And in those review processes, and Mrs. Elmore has a copy of that document right there in front of her, as they reviewed many of those locations, and they reviewed 5 years prior to siting the facility and 5 years after siting the facility, and compared that to a community in which there was no facility, but a very similar community, they found that essentially there was no change between those. Now, there would be small changes in any particular community, but by and large, after reviewing all of the locations, the conclusion of the report was that there was essentially no difference in the community cited with the facility and not cited with the facility.
And how many years was the study?
5 years prior to the siting and 5 years after the siting of the facility.
Okay. Is that the longest study, the longest length of study that we know of in this?
I'd say it's the most recent study. I'm not sure it's the longest study, and I'm not sure of what other longer studies would be available.
I'm quoting now from the results of what Mr. Hennett just said. In the results section, it says, it is important to stress again that no cause and effect relationship can be drawn from our results. In other words, we are not claiming that any positive or negative economic impacts detected were caused by the presence of the facility. However, we have many reports of citizens that live in towns, El Dorado, Arkansas, Emil, Alabama, Rock Hill.
I take issue with Rock Hill. Certainly Rock Hill has a very vibrant economy, the Chamber of Commerce, our mayor. We look at the kind of growth that's happened in Rock Hill, and I think the city's been very pleased with that.
Let's talk about Emil, Alabama, where the employment rate went from 5% to 21% after the hazardous waste landfill was located there. And in El Dorado, Arkansas, where there has been no new industry in over 5 years, actually in over 7 years.
Granville County, I can substantiate there's been a $3 million direct impact on Granville County in the last month and a half. I mean, that's contracts that have been canceled, goods that have been not bought.
Well, I can tell you the property values around our facility in Rock Hill have doubled in the last 5 years.
What about the health measures?
Health measures, South Carolina's Department of Health and Environmental Control Control has done a complete audit around our facility using a 2-mile radius to sample soil and air. And what they find is no increase over the background levels. Background levels are the levels that would normally exist in our everyday lives. So over the 7-year life of our facility, we have seen no deterioration of the environment. In fact, I take issue with Billy's comments about what comes out of a stack. I think that that's just not correct. I think a well-operated incinerator done to federal standards and with good operating company does not emit anything other than the types of things that would come out of an automobile exhaust. As a matter of fact, we figure that the stack of this North Carolina facility would be equivalent to about 18 cars driven over a year's time.
I take issue with those statements, and I'd like to quote from an article from El Dorado, Arkansas, where the Ensco incinerator has reported to be the Cadillac of incinerators, the best available technology, a showcase model for the industry, where the total number of brain tumors for 1988 was reported 18. The expected number for the population would be 1, and in 1989 they already had 4 additional cases of brain tumor. They feel like they're playing Russian roulette by even living in El Dorado, Arkansas. The people that look after worker safety went into that plant and did wipe tests and found dioxin on the floor of the plant. There are rare forms of bone marrow cancer and 14 times the national average of a rare sinus cancer that is supposedly a 1 in a million.
I can't comment on specific data for El Dorado, but let me just say this. Environmental groups like the Environmental Defense Fund, for example, are very pro-incineration, have come out very strongly chastising the federal government for not doing more things to provide solutions. And that's what this facility is. It is a solution to an environmental problem. The EDF says, EPA, you're taking too long. We need more integrated systems like the system that North Carolina is trying to install to prevent the kinds of problems and clean up the kinds of problems that have existed in this country in the past.
That's one environmental group, and it's the only one that I know of that has made any such claims for incineration. All the ones that I am aware of, National Toxics Campaign, Greenpeace, and all of our state organizations that are part of NC Warren, plus all the county ones, and there are 36 in all, are totally opposed to incineration.
We're going to take a break right here, and then we'll hold your point, and we'll come right back to it. Our subject is the Granville County Waste Incinerator controversy, and when we broke there, Rob, you had a comment. You wanted to respond to Billy.
Yes, I think the environmental groups are not, it's not just an isolated group. There are many environmental groups that recognize that the federal government is right and that incineration is the best proven technology. The Earth Coalition called me yesterday down in Mecklenburg County, recognized they've got a serious household hazardous waste problem in the county, and the county has been unable to put a program together. The EPA estimates there's 10 to 30 gallons of household hazardous waste, paints, cleaners, oven cleaners, things like that, in each and every one of our homes. They want to manage those correctly. Rather than throwing them into your trash and then ending up in a landfill, they've called and asked if Thermal Chem would assist the Earth Coalition in providing a hazardous waste cleanup day, whereby we would in the county advertise and take these kinds of materials and treat them properly. Take them to an incineration facility, treat them the way the federal government feels is the correct way to do it, and thereby provide a good service to the community.
Now, there has been controversy over the Caldwell County incinerator. Now, is it fair to compare the two, what we're talking about?
Completely different.
Absolutely not fair.
What's the difference?
Well, the Caldwell County incinerator was originally developed as an incinerator that sat on a solid waste landfill, and its original purpose was to burn boxes and pallets and trash to reduce the volume of materials going into a solid waste landfill. That was the original concept. From that incinerator, a company then purchased or leased the rights to use that incinerator. It was grandfathered into the federal system. It never operated with a hazardous waste scrubber system on it. It was an incinerator that never had the pollution control devices on it that would be under the current technology that is required both by the federal government today as well as by North Carolina's own standards.
One thing I wanted to comment on there, talking about grandfathering, we have looked at what is coming up in federal law. There are clean air regulations that are getting ready to be implemented. One of the reasons why we feel that the state is in such a hurry to implement this incinerator is because if they don't do it before these regulations go into effect, they will not be able to build this incinerator or site it in North Carolina.
Just the opposite, Chris. Just the opposite. North Carolina's incinerator regulations, proposed incinerator regulations, as well as the air toxics regulations, are already more strict than the federally proposed Congress and Clean Air Act.
Well, we don't have those regulations yet, so we don't really know what we're going to have.
The air toxics regulations were passed last year and exist, and they were based on health risk standards that the North Carolina Academy of Science developed. And they're based on what's called 1 × 10⁻⁴. And that's the new level that the federal regulations are trying to go to. So North Carolina already has more stringent regulations. In addition to that, the Hazardous Waste Management Commission has already said that because of the regulations that are required, we would even meet 100 times more strict regulations than that. Well, so we're already 100 times past what is proposed in Congress.
And your track record is Caldwell County, in which you totally ignored your responsibility, yours being the state. You allowed this thing to function for years and years at the old regulation levels, causing people to literally die. And that's your track record. And you have nothing else to go by. So it's fair to compare this facility to that. You're woefully inadequate in the enforcement division. You're sitting here hiding behind the legislative mandate, and then when the darn thing gets into operation, you're going to hide behind the EPA rules and regulations, the Division of Environmental Management, which is totally incapable of even looking at the plant. They come out to a site one time in a year and call before they come to see if they're doing their job.
John, we have said over and over, we have said for more than a year, the Hazardous Waste Management Commission has recognized that the public, the general public, doesn't trust government in regulating facilities like this. And so the commission has suggested that on-site monitors be made available that would report to the county itself. And when we wrote our contract with Thermal Chem, we required them to give the county access that's necessary so that the county doesn't have to trust anybody. And the funding is available for pay for those people so that the county doesn't have to spend any money involved in that process. As well as recently, the senator from Senator Royal has proposed, or I get the impression there is some proposal for full-time, 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week monitoring in that process for any facility that's located in North Carolina. The commission has endorsed that idea.
The state is going to shift the burden of overseeing it to the counties again, just like was done in Caldwell County.
That's not what we said at all.
That sounds to me like what you said.
We just said full-time state monitoring, 7 days a week, 3 shifts a day, as long as the facility operates, in addition to local monitoring to oversee to make sure that you're comfortable with that level.
Let's talk about, just for a moment, Carolina Solite, which burns hazardous waste, and the situation that they have down there. The state was, because the citizens insisted that the state go down there and check on that situation, because of all of the complaints of the citizens, they went down and they said they're meeting all federal and state regulations. Okay, then the Clean Water Fund asked the state health department to send a toxicologist down there. And what they found was that the Solite workers' cancer risk was documented by state health officials to be 2,000 times greater than the federal health standards allow. And do you think that the state has shut down or has fined or has done anything other than to tell these people to do the same thing that they told them to do 14 years ago, to stop dumping into the creek, to fix their aged equipment that was falling apart, and all of this after they went in for the second time, they made a report and found all of these deficiencies. Now, that's the kind of state enforcement and regulation we can count on in North Carolina.
Is that the way?
None. And
none.
What we assume is happening there, and that Ms. Elmore has not said in her statements, is that that facility operates as an exception or an exemption to the federal regulations.
More loopholes that are available for the hazardous waste management industry, and we're sick and tired of the loopholes and the grandfathering and all of those kinds of things that always take these people off the hook.
All right, what is thermal chem?
Well, for example, we monitor the health of our employees constantly. In fact, we retain Georgia Tech to help us in that analysis. We monitor every bodily function possible on a yearly physical. Every year, and we maintain data. Over the 7 years of our operation, we've never had a health claim. We've never had anyone file suit against us for any environmental or health damages. In fact, we see absolutely no signs of anything that would concern us in regards to the health of our employees.
I want to address that.
And that's because we take the precautions. We invest a lot of money up front to do it right. 25% of our workforce is in the safety and compliance area. Safety and compliance is the most important thing in our company's approach to doing business. We just went over 1 million hours without a lost time accident, our industry record. And it's the approach of the operator, I think, that makes the difference. So, and I can't talk about how other operators work. I can tell you how Thermochem does its job.
But you have had a couple of explosions at your plant, right? Chris?
The one thing I wanted to mention is that the one reason that they haven't had any health claims is because the citizens of Rock Hill do not want Thermochem's money. I have been in contact with the citizens group down there. There are around 300 to 400 people who are extremely angry about the fact that Thermochem is in their community and is disrupting their lifestyle, as well as making the environment nauseous for them. There are smells down there that they cannot get rid of and they cannot track down, and everybody claims that it's not their responsibility. The citizens are reporting health problems such as respiratory infections, extreme sinus problems, bacterial infections, and other strange health disorders which cannot be attributable to a normal population without incineration.
Well, let's take a look at that, for example, and I think Darrell is correct. So the standards we live with are 100 times more severe than what General Industry works with. In Rock Hill, we have the 6th largest air polluter in America who discharges 2.5 million pounds of emissions to the atmosphere, perfectly legal. We, on the other hand, compared that 2.5 million pounds, discharge about 300 pounds over that same course. They're the same materials, the same chemicals. In one case, they're used in production. In our case, these are residuals that have been recycled and then need to be treated effectively.
We're going to take a break here, and I want our audience to know we're going to expand our half-hour time to an hour today to cover this subject as thoroughly as we possibly can in that time frame. So stay with us. We'll be back in just a few moments. Our subject is the Granville County waste incinerator controversy, and I believe you had a response here, John.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to Mr. Kirk's proposition. What he's talking about is the people on site at Rock Hill who wear protective clothing, wash going in and out, I assume. They've never done any health studies off the site. Nobody has. And that's the biggest fear that we have. And that's part of the wonderful appeal of incineration is that all these companies have to do that are creating this noxious stuff, all they got to do is come put it in Thermochem's lap, and their liability is dissolved. Nobody can prove anymore where it came from and whose responsibility is, and that's the same position Thermochem takes. If it goes into the atmosphere, kills people, their position is you can't prove it's us. So we're insulated from liability, the state's insulated from liability, and the people are still dead.
Do you do any studies outside of your employees?
We study our employee population. Let me tell you what we do. We have installed voluntarily, for example, air monitors outside of our facility that monitor the atmosphere as a second check against the instrumentation used in our stack for our treatment process.
Are people reporting to you that there are health problems in
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any claims whatsoever. And all I know is that the Environmental and Health Department in South Carolina has done an extensive audit, and their data shows no increase over background levels. There's a stream that runs right beside our facility. The stream is perfectly clean. There's no discharge there. There's no pollution there. We voluntarily put instrumentation in place to monitor it, and we've gone a step further. We link that directly to our regulatory agency so they can read the instruments as we read the instruments. So if there's a concern, instrumentation will pick it up.
How do you prevent the problems that have been discussed here? How do you prevent not getting things out in the atmosphere?
It's a good question. You've got to have a good system, a good company, and a good approach up front. You got to make sure that you have your priorities correct. And for us, we never sit down and discuss anything until we discuss safety and compliance. It's how we've developed the best compliance record in the industry.
I think that one thing that we ought to address here in terms of liability is what EPA and some of the folks that work at EPA think about incineration. There's a gentleman named Mr. Hugh Kaufman, who is the Assistant Director of Hazardous Waste Control Division in Washington, D.C., who says that the main job of the waste management industry is to provide liability transfers that shift liability for hazardous waste from the companies that generate it to the taxpayers. These companies pay really large sums of money, which is very good for business for Thermochem, to transfer their liability and their waste from the pockets of the shareholders of the companies to the citizens of North Carolina. That's what's going to happen here. When the state condemns the land and buys it up, they're going to retain ownership to it, and they're going to lease it back to Thermochem. Over the 20 to 30 year lifespan of this site, they're going to be burying 24,500 tons per year of hazardous ash, minimized waste, which is going to be concentrated. And when that 20 to 30 year period is up, the state is going to have the liability for cleaning up the problems on the site, as well as paying for the liability that they have incurred around the site.
If, Mr. Henry, let me ask you this. What is your time frame for having a site? And if you don't reach that time frame, what's going to happen?
Well, the regional agreement says that we shall have the facility operational by December 1991.
Okay, and what happens if you don't?
Well, if we can't have it operational, if we missed any of the milestones in the regional agreement, the agreement says that we're automatically out of that regional agreement. If we are automatically out of the agreement, if South Carolina and Alabama, the primary trading partners with North Carolina, close the gates to the facilities down there, then we will have a major problem. We'll have a problem in that North Carolina's companies will not be able to properly dispose of their waste.
No, or
they just have to dispose of it somewhere else.
There is no place else because
they are responsible and we're not. What's wrong with that?
The Attorney General's office will simply have to take it to court because it's unconstitutional for those states to block the transfer of waste.
So what you're saying is that the responsibility should be the citizens of South Carolina, not the citizens of North Carolina.
We're saying we don't want
which is
to
what Governor Campbell was so concerned about.
We say reduce it. We want Office of Technology Assessment has the research arm of the federal government, of Congress, has said that 50% reduction of toxic waste is feasible and reasonable in 5 years with existing technology, and that's what the citizens of North Carolina want.
Excuse me, Ms. Elmore, 50% still leaves 50%.
And
50% of 150 million pounds that went off-site in 1988 says that there's still 50% that has to be managed somewhere.
Okay, but that much didn't go out of state.
Well, it still has to be managed somewhere, and regardless of whose numbers you use. Mr. Pike and I had a discussion this morning, and Mr. Pike quoted 30% for the first year. No matter if we use your 50% number over 5 years or Mr. Pike's number of 30% the first year,
that's going to reduce it tremendously, and we will not need these oversized facilities that require out-of-state waste in order to make them economically feasible and profitable to
Mrs. Elmore,
to
are you
Thermochem.
Suggesting there's no need for a facility?
I'm saying there's no need for incineration or landfill in the state of North Carolina. That's
what
exactly
are we going to do with the landfillable and the incinerable waste that North Carolina generates?
There are other ways that you can treat that waste.
Well, the first thing
you know how.
Quit making it.
No, I don't know, because
you
the federal government
and
prescribes incineration, for example, is for 80% of the volume. And at the same time, the EPA is going to add 1.8 million metric tons of new waste that are now going to be categorized as hazardous, are going to come into the system. So not only do we have what we currently exist, but the system's going to grow about fourfold.
What's happening to this waste now? I mean,
it is being managed in various facilities over the country. North Carolina predominantly ships almost all of its waste out of state that it ships off-site.
North Carolina is the lowest producer of these 5 states in the agreement. And with a 50% reduction of our waste, it would take very little for North Carolina to be able to manage its own waste within its own borders.
How can we reduce it?
Well, the first way is to start putting some money where the paper is. Right now we have the Pollution Prevention Pays program, which is a model for the country. The only problem is that the legislature and the governor have saw fit not to give this particular office the monies that they need in order to practice toxic use reduction. Waste minimization is the way that the state is going today. All waste minimization means is concentration of waste. It is not an effort to actually encourage industry to change their waste, their chemical use practices. What we think should happen is that the government should help industry reduce the waste that they're producing. And if they're not going to make an effort to do that by providing the funds and the emphasis necessary, because right now the emphasis is on creating a market for the cheap disposal of waste, which is what an incinerator is.
I don't think that's true. And one of the things we provide, and I think it's important to note, is we support fully reduction and recycling. We've given many seminars on how to reduce volumes, how to recycle. In fact, this treatment facility will be an important component of recycling. As you recycle a stream, you take out the bad pieces of it, and you've got to treat that somewhere. It doesn't disappear. It has to still go out for treatment. That's what a facility like this does. We should emphasize reduction and recycling. That is the most important thing we can do.
And yet the South has the worst environmental health in the United States. And the South has also become the nation's biggest waste dump. And this is documented in a study done by the Institute for Southern Studies. 2/3 of the nation's toxic waste is coming into the southeastern states, and we feel that the whole trend is for the Northeast and the other industrial sections of the country to dump it on Dixie. We've been hearing this from the northern states. We've been hearing it from state after state, from Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey. In the boardrooms, they're saying, we'll get rid of our hazardous waste. No, these 5 states are developing way over capacity, and we'll dump it on Dixie. Now, that is what we are not going, I mean, it is not absurd. It is happening. It's already happened. 66% has already been brought here for treatment and disposal.
May I complete my sentence, please? The circumstances are that the regional agreement is in among 5 states. And between those 5 states, in the contract that we drew up with these folks here, we say North Carolina's waste first, agreement states waste second, and if there is any capacity left over, they could receive waste from anywhere else in the process. Based on the latest numbers that we had that was done by an independent contractor who was estimating the amount of waste, once you take North Carolina's incinerable waste and the agreement states incinerable waste, there will be no other capacity. Each of those other states that Ms. Elmore just mentioned up in the Northeast had to do the capacity assurance plan that North Carolina had to do. They have to plan for the next 20 years how they're going to manage their waste. Not one single state that she just mentioned is planning on using North Carolina's facilities.
The states are not, excuse me, the states are not, but the companies that work in those states are, and that's one important point that needs to be made, is that there is no guarantee that the companies that work in North Carolina are going to send their waste to your facility. They can send it anywhere they want to.
That's absolutely
and
true.
If it's cheaper for them to send it to South Carolina or to Alabama or to wherever, they will do that. And there is no guarantee that North Carolina's waste is going to be used to fill this facility. And we think that waste is going to be coming in from all over the country and in other places in the world, for example.
Generators make 2 decisions on how they decide, or basically 3 decisions on how they decide to use the facility. How safe is the facility, and how can they collect and minimize their liability, as Mr. Pike said a few minutes ago. A second, how much is it going to cost, and where are they going to have to ship it to? And third, what kind of agreements and contracts do they have in place already? First of all, this will be a premier facility designed to the best quality of any facility in the country, meeting the tightest and strictest standards, which would limit the generator's liabilities the best of any facility in the country. Second, North Carolina's generators would be ridiculous to send off their waste to places in Arizona or someplace else and increase their costs when they had a first-class facility in North Carolina. The only question then is, will contracts that they have already require them for some period of time to ship waste to some other facility?
And I think the supporting point is, for example, in my discussions with the cleanup days, one of the responses I got from the environmental groups is, boy, it is so expensive to have these things treated properly. And I think it's a key point. You know, it's been said that it's cheap, it's easy. This group's response was, it's so expensive. In fact, that is the one reason why we haven't done it before, because it costs so much money to treat these wastes effectively.
We hear first class and properly and state of the art, and all of this means nothing, because the toxic metals are going to come out of that smokestack, and they're going to be in that ash, and the landfills, EPA will admit that all landfills leak. It's going to get into the groundwater. It's going to be in the air, and in the surface water, in the groundwater, and people are going to get sick.
I completely disagree. History says that's not true. Not all, in fact, the majority of the landfills don't leak. It's in the government report.
There has never been
There are always
in-depth epidemiological study prior to the siting of one of these facilities. All you do is you put the thing there, and then you say, well, you can't prove it's us. That's been your attack from day one. And I say the entire waste management industry sits there and says, well, you can't prove it's us, so it must not be. We have no responsibility and no liability.
That's not the approach at all,
And
John.
until and unless there's a full-scale, one that would take 2 to 10 years, epidemiological study, you ought not be putting an incinerator anywhere.
Well, I totally disagree. I think, first of all, there are incinerators everywhere in the state already. I mean, there are several operating as we speak.
And the
there are
state
many.
isn't
In fact,
overseeing them either.
there are some running right now that are just as big as the unit we're talking about here. It's been running for quite some time. Incineration technology is proven technology. It's worked well. You can control these things by operating it correctly, working with the federal government. Thermal Chem, for example, volunteered to work with the EPA on metals limits. Metals go into the ash, and the ash is stabilized to federal standards. It has to pass several tests before it can even be put into a landfill. And technically, it is not hazardous, but because of what's called the derived from rule, you treat it as such.
Research from the Southwest Institute found that 53% of these heavy metals come out of the smokestack rather than going into the ash.
Let me pose this. What if your plan, as you're operating now, your protests and whatnot, do not work? What is your next step? What is the next step for Granville County?
You know, the step, it's not one step, it's 1,000 steps. They cannot possibly think that we will ever lie down and be a good neighbor to Thermal Chem or the Hazardous Waste Management Commission. We will fight them for the full 20 to 30 years. We'll do our dead level best after they get there to shut them down. Because there's absolutely, I've listened to 20 hours of I don't know, or no, we don't have the answer to this, that, and the other. And there's no way we're going to feel secure if that thing comes to our county. And if they give us $2 million a year, we're going to use all $2 million a year to try and shut them down and get them out of Granville County. And hopefully they won't go anywhere else. You know, and until and unless they prove that it's 100%, not 99.999%, but 100% safe and secure, they are not an acceptable risk to us or anybody else in North Carolina. And the legislature ought to stand up and take notice.
How are they going to prove? How are they going to prove that whether they're safe? What do you think?
First of all, they don't do monitoring. They do one test burn at the beginning of the process, and they might test it again, once a year, maybe.
No, that's good for 10 years.
Well, at any rate, they test the thing to see if it's burning hot enough. They have no earthly idea what the emissions are coming out, and they acknowledge that. They don't know what the compounds are or what the extent is. The Rock Hill, South Carolina plant in January was tested one time, and they were emitting or feeding, and I'm not sure which, 25 times the level of arsenic that was recommended by the EPA. It was cited by the EPA, and they said, must not have been us, must have been somebody else. We appeal the decision, or we deny it.
We didn't appeal anything. Our facility is monitored quite frequently. About 100 times a year, people come in and check our facility. The federal government comes in routinely and takes a look at data, and what Mr. Pike is referring to is it's like an IRS audit. They're very thorough, very thorough. They took some paper and they come to some conclusions. The way the audit process works is they give us findings and we respond to it. EPA took a number that was inaccurate because they took it off of a lab test that was not complete. We provided them with the rest of the information, and they agreed. They said that there was not an issue with arsenic being fed to the unit.
Now, you mentioned you test your people that work there, but you have not bothered to do a testing of citizens.
Well, I don't know if bother is the right word.
Well, let's say you've not undertaken that possibility of extending your testing.
Well, here's the way we feel about it. First of all, at any one time, there was a reference to people wearing suits, and at any one time there's 100 people on our plant site, and about less than 10, probably 8, actually have to suit up in any sort of protective gear. We bring groups right up to the incinerator because it's safe. If our approach goes, if there isn't a danger, shouldn't it not be with the people who work with it every single day and who stand right next to the equipment and right next to the materials? They're the people who are exposed more than anyone else. So we look at that group and say that group should be a good indication as to what's going on at our facility. In addition to ongoing monitoring, testing every day, the types of procedures we take to measure atmospheric emission that exists in the facility.
There is no way to test
it's the kind of approach we take. Safety and compliance first.
There is no way to continuously monitor the heavy metals. No technology available for that.
You control heavy metals by the feed rate. That's how you do it.
If you do not find an acceptable area to set up this incinerator, what's going to happen? I mean, are we going to go back to sending it out to other states?
Presently, the mandate to the Hazardous Waste Management Commission is to find a site. I guess that the only alternative would be that the General Assembly would have to create a new mandate that gave the Commission some other alternative method to pursue. At this point in time, we have no authority except for that one, which is to select a site, design a facility, permit that facility, select an operator, and go forth with the operation. If the Commission or if the General Assembly decides to recreate the Commission into a waste reduction network, they surely have that prerogative. Yay. But they have not done that at this point in time.
So that's the next step that you would have.
We have a very limited focus because we're not allowed to do anything else. The General Assembly has specified what we're entitled to do.
To give you an idea of where GROW is as a group, up to this point we have been protest and rally, and we have also been educating and disseminating information. What we are doing now as a group is we're turning into a legislative lobbying body, and we are going to worry the legislature until they sit down and do what the citizens of North Carolina want, which is to responsibly deal with the waste management issue rather than trying to push it off on an independent body which is accountable to no one but the governor, like the Waste Management Commission.
How much support have you had from other counties?
We are working with all of the organizations that are in the NC Warren group, which is, I believe, 35 to 36. That's one of the reasons why we've been able to get off the ground so quickly, is because there are folks from around the state as well as other parts of the nation who are sending us information, providing us with the expertise that is necessary to fight this. And if we run it out of Granville County, we're going to chase it across the state, because we do not believe that any community should be turned into an environmental sacrifice zone, which is exactly what this is.
Iredell and Rowan County, is the controversy as hot and heated as it is in Granville County at this point?
Yes.
Indeed, they feel as strong or stronger than we do, and if they are cited, we will go over there and help them, and we have made an agreement with them. If we are cited, they're going to come over and help us. So this is a partnership that we're making with any county who is picked as a potential site. We will help them.
There is a commitment on the part of all these 36 organizations that we will assist any victim county in the state of North Carolina that is threatened with a hazardous waste incinerator or landfill.
You got to recognize, I think it's a critical issue, and it is an emotional issue. But we as a society enjoy all the conveniences we have, but we don't know what to do with our waste problems. And that's hazardous waste, the low-level nuclear waste, municipal landfills. Everyone enjoys all our conveniences, but we don't know how we want to handle waste problems. Our approach is send it over there. Send it over there.
Just don't burn it or bury it.
I think that one important point is that we do know how we want to handle it. The problem is that the people that are in decision-making positions in the state are not listening. And what we're going to say is that if elected officials do not listen, then we're going to put somebody else in there that will listen, because we think that the officials should be accountable to the citizens, and that's what we're going to ensure.
Did you anticipate this kind of reaction in Granville County or from
I think that the Commission has said all along that they were not surprised that any particular community might be opposed to the process, or at least some citizens within the community might be opposed to the process.
So you sort of knew it was going to come. Did you realize that it would pick up the momentum that it has picked up?
I'm not sure that we realized that it would take on the various characteristics that it has, but I think we were not surprised that it was a vociferous opposition.
How much has the public demonstration really affected how you would operate in what you're trying to do?
Well, I think the Commission has said all along that two things. First of all, that they are concerned about the public's feelings in the process. They want to get the input from the citizens of any particular county in which a site is designated as suitable. But the Commission's mandate is to select a site based on the best available technical information. And we are limited in that respect to reviewing the data based on the best available technical information. And we have asked repeatedly for the counties to provide us with as much technical information as we possibly can get about the site and that area that surrounds the site.
They can't possibly pick the very best possible site in a hurry-up offense, and it is an offense because it's very offensive. They cannot possibly do it in the time frame they've scheduled, and that was the gist of the judge's ruling yesterday, that is unconscionable. It is certainly unreasonable to expect the best possible site to be selected, and they're not looking for the best site, they're looking for the quickest site. And that is wrong. It is wrong from the very beginning and should be changed.
And the people of North Carolina do not feel that they have had a say in this whole process. And the formal hearings that have been held, the comment periods, you know, that's nothing but a sham, because the people voice their opinions and they are told thank you very much, and that's the end of that. It's not even listened to.
Okay, very quickly, what's your next step? Where are you going? I mean,
well, we're raising money. We're raising other things.
Consciousness, and also we're going to raise the consciousness and the attention level of the legislature. We think that this is just as important an issue as the budget, and we think that it's connected with the budget because of the tremendous liability that the estate is going to incur for the citizens of North Carolina in the next 20 to 30 years.
and what's your next step?
We have no choice. The mandate from the General Assembly is to go forward.
Our job is to work as a hired contractor for the state of North Carolina and provide the services that the state has requested of us.
Well, thank you very much. And we know that this controversy will go on in the next few weeks, and we will certainly be looking and listening very closely as to what happens. Stay with us. We'll be right back with a wrap-up.
Dateline 1958. WRAL TV5 builds one of the most technologically advanced broadcast facilities in the nation, sending out a crystal clear signal from an 1,170-foot tower of power. Then, in 1978, WRAL erects the tallest tower on the East Coast, 2,000 feet toward the heavens. But on one cold, icy December day, that 4 million pounds of steel came tumbling down. But we're on our way back up. Construction has begun on a new tower that will give you a sharper look at WRAL TV. We'll keep you updated.
As the week closed, an appeals court panel overturned the injunction that prevented the state from testing the Granville County site. While the county has 10 days to review the appeal and act on it, the Hazardous Waste Commission hopes to begin research on the area as early as midweek. The Granville residents fighting the incinerator say the appeals court decision was a setback, but their fight is not over. Hazardous waste is one of the consequences of our lifestyles. With hazards, there are risks. With risks, there are opposition and protest. People living in the areas under consideration feel they are in a no-win situation. But the state is stuck between a rock and a hard place. We made a deal with other states, and it's North Carolina's turn to live up to our end of the deal. The state's selling job is made tougher by questions raised by people living near the shutdown Caldwell County's incinerator. There does not appear to be much room for compromise here either. Based on what we have heard here this morning, opponents do not want any kind of incinerator anywhere. The state is mandated to select a site in less than a month. It's looking more and more as if the final decision will be made in a court of law. How do you feel about this issue? We'd like to hear from you about this or any other subject we've covered on Assignment Sunday.